Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Personalization for Associations, Creating a Seamless Digital Experience for Your Members. This webinar today is a co-presentation by the team at Unleash Technologies and Acquia. My name is Chris Jorgenson. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Unleash Technologies. I'm joined today by Jason Currier, who is Director of Nonprofits for the Mid-Atlantic region at Acquia. We'd like to thank you for sharing part of your day with us, and we're excited to hopefully provide some value to you over this next hour. For those of you who don't know us already, Unleash Technologies has been dedicated to creating award-winning websites and digital experiences for our association clients since 2007. We have a particular focus on open source web technologies, with our primary platforms being Drupal and WordPress. This year, our webinar series has focused on rising technologies that we are keeping an eye on or beginning to implement on behalf of some of our clients. So you can see blockchain technology, voice technology, progressive web apps, and today's topic, which is personalization. And today we're excited to share an overview of how your association can begin to leverage it and hopefully create a higher level of member engagement. At this point, I want to give Jason a chance to tell you a little bit about Acquia. Chances are you might have heard of them before, but in case this is your first time, I'll let Jason say a few words.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's great to be with all of you today. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. So let me give you a quick introduction about Acquia. So as an organization, Acquia was founded by the creator of Drupal. We've been recognized by independent analysts like Forrester and Gartner as a leader in the web content management space. Just a little bit of logistics about us. Our company's based in Boston. We've got 14 global offices in 7 different countries, well over 1,200 enterprise customers, somewhere in the neighborhood of over 4,000 sites powered by Acquia today. And we work with wonderful partners like Unleash Technologies, who are excited to co-present with today.
Thank you, Jason. So as we get started today, I'd like to define personalization as it relates to our hour together. But before we do that, I'd like to share some examples of personalization that you all are probably more than likely aware of already. So Netflix, I'm sure most, if not all of us joining the webinar today are familiar with this first example of personalization. From its inception, Netflix has used data as an asset to personalize its content and service to its customers. Netflix uses data in many ways, but 2 key uses are enabling Netflix to create value for its customers are 1, feeding its recommendation engine, and 2, predicting successful new original content and content acquisitions based on viewing habits of their customers. So if you're like me, Netflix is constantly feeding you recommendations on shows you might like, and it's amazing how often they get it right. Funny story is Netflix awarded a $1 million prize way back in 2009 to a development team for an algorithm that increased the accuracy of the company's recommendation engine by about 10%. Funny enough, today it doesn't even use the $1 million code it spent on and has no plans to implement it. Part of this is because it moved away from the mail DVDs to the video streaming, but it just goes to show you that even back then, Netflix saw the power of personalization and what it could mean to its business. Our next example is another household name that I'm sure everyone is aware of. But back in 2011, Coca-Cola launched its famous Share a Coke campaign in Australia, and then finally brought it over here to the United States in 2014. It was primarily an effort to reach millennials, and obviously each bottle contained one of the most popular first names assigned to that generation of people. And eventually bottles contained semi-personal labels beyond first names, like better half. And according to Ad Age today, about 800 first names are used. Now, putting first names on Coke bottles was a successful move. In the US, this idea resulted in an increased sales volume for the first time in 4 years. And finally, we come to my favorite example, and this one is legendary. You may have not have heard of it because this happened back in about 2012. But essentially, back then, Target was really trying to hit new levels of customer tracking, and they partnered with a statistical guru named Andrew Pohl. And Pohl identified 25 products that, when purchased together, would indicate a woman is likely pregnant. The value that Target would get from this information was it could send coupons to the pregnant woman at an expensive and, let's be honest, habit-forming period of her life. So plugged into Target's customer tracking technology, Pohl's formula was amazing. And it generated this true story that really is pretty funny. A man walked into Target outside of Minneapolis and demanded to see the store manager. And in his hand, he was clutching coupons that had been sent to his daughter. He was furious. And according to an employee, the conversation went along these lines. My daughter got this in the mail, and she's still in high school, and you're sending her coupons for baby clothes and cribs? Are you trying to encourage her to get pregnant? So the manager at the time didn't have any idea what this man was talking about. But he looked at the mailer, and sure enough, it was addressed to the man's daughter, and it had advertisements for maternity clothing, nursery furniture, and even pictures of smiling babies. The manager apologized and then called a few days later to apologize again. So on the phone, the father was somewhat embarrassed. He said, I had a talk with my daughter, and it turns out there's been some activities in my house that I haven't been completely aware of. She's due in August. I owe you an apology. So that, if you can imagine, was 2012, and now in 2018, we've come a long way. But those were just a few quick examples of personalization kind of in the greater consciousness that I thought you might find amusing. So for today's conversation, what are Jason and I really asking in terms of what is personalization? And that is a content experience that unifies customer data and content from multiple sources to deliver in-context, customized experiences across any channel. So before we get into associations and nonprofits, I think it'd be valuable to take a step back and look at the private sector and just see how, as consumers are evolving expectations due to personalization and what that means. So right now, 74% of online consumers get frustrated with websites when content presented to them has nothing to do with their interests. And that probably is not a shocking number. I think we're all experiencing this, where as the digital experiences we have are more and more personalized, we do get frustrated more quickly. It's just a byproduct of that effect. For private sector companies and consumers, personalization has been adopted at a rapid pace. And with fierce competition online, companies know that investing in personalization is a must. And the ROI has been proven in the results. And as you can see from demand gen, there's a 20% increase in sales opportunities when leads are nurtured with personalized content. Again, not probably shocking to anyone on this call. And finally, companies that are investing in personalization can expect 30% more sales than their competitors. And so it's no surprise that really we've seen on the private sector side a real rush to adopt personalization because it was almost a necessity to stay competitive. So this brings us to our topic today, which is what is the impact of personalization on associations and nonprofits specifically? And before we get into website personalization, let's look a little bit about how associations and nonprofits have used personalization up to this point. If you're attending this webinar, I have no doubt that your association or nonprofit has likely already used personalization in one of the following channels: direct mail, email marketing, annual meetings, and publications. So all of these have different levels of efforts involved, but my guess is if you're mid to large association or nonprofit, you've already done all of this. And now you're probably, hopefully, thinking, what's that next step? So a few stats for you, and these come directly from Community Brands, which most of you probably know on the AMS side of things. And they partnered with Edge Research to publish a digital member study in 2017. And this study examines the gap between member expectations and association technology. So they administered parallel surveys to more than 1,000 members of professional membership organizations and 400 staff representatives who work at those organizations. So the studies examined attitudes, values, and behaviors on technology from both sides and perspectives. And the date range of the surveys were between October 18th and October 30th, 2017. So still pretty current. And I picked a few stats that I thought would be most relevant to our time today. But so 33% of members believe their organization personalizes the content they see using user-provided info and data to show them things that they may be interested in, recommendations and discounts. So really, you know, a third of people are assuming that you as an association or nonprofit are personalizing the content you're serving to them. A majority of members, so again, about 69%, feel more engaged within an organization after receiving personalized content based on their past activity because it shows the organization is interested in meeting their needs. Again, not a shock since we're seeing a lot of that same data on the private side of things. And then what's also interesting, probably relevant to you guys, is 58% of association staff are interested in a solution that helps personalize information and content for their members. So let's look at some opportunities for personalization. Again, this comes directly from the Community Brands 2017 Digital Member Survey. And you'll see, you know, so the top three were our info about specific programs related to a member's interests and needs, recommendations on continuing education related to members' interests and needs, and relevant job postings. So those were the top three. And you'll notice that the center column is members, and then they actually broke it out by millennial members. So you'll see that on almost each instance, the millennial member percentage is higher. What's funny is if you look down towards the lower end of the spectrum, happy birthday note, 48%. Recommendations on other members they may want to meet, 50%. Recognition of work anniversaries, 50%. So while there is interest on those, it's just very fascinating to see what really is going to make an impact and what you should probably be looking at in 2008 and beyond in terms of what content your association or nonprofit is going to try and personalize. And then lastly, I want to also look at donations and personalization, because this is another subject matter where the data proves the investment in personalization can really pay dividends. So 47% of people want to make charitable contributions via digital channels now. And I don't think that'll surprise anybody. 61% of those people think nonprofits should use more digital technology. And then this is really the key stat, is that 44% of people surveyed would be willing to donate up to 10% more if they were offered a personalized experience. And that number jumps up even higher to 62% for millennials. So I hope with this information, we've shown you that the time to really be planning for association or personalization at your association is now, because it's already happening and the data supports the value. At this point, I'm going to turn the reins over to Jason. So the marketplace offers a range of different products to help organizations leverage personalization on their website, and our team is excited particularly about Acquia Lift. Jason is going to share his insight in working specifically with associations and nonprofits, and also just touch a little bit on how Acquia Lift can position your association for success.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, my role here at Acquia is to work solely with nonprofits and nonprofit associations. So what I had hoped to share with you today is a little bit of around my experience in working with some of those types of organizations, giving you some sort of high-level conceptual ideas around personalization, talk a little bit about how technology can solve some of the challenges that we typically hear and see from some of the prospective clients that I work with, and then leave you with a few ideas around how you can begin to implement some personalization strategies, and then also some ideas around putting those actually into place within your organization itself. So, you know, Chris has done a really nice job of showing us some statistics and some numbers and figures. I think it's likely that most of you are here today because you've read or heard about something relating to personalization. It's certainly top of mind for many of the marketing professionals around the globe today, and that's for good reason. Delivering a customized experience that's based on a visitor's unique characteristic or browsing behavior has been shown time and time again to really improve website engagement metrics and increase conversion rates, which is really what most of us are probably here today to find out more about. So, Chris did a nice job of kind of using some of those statistics to really highlight the expectation from customers. They're certainly expecting more from their digital experiences. And in particular, members and non-members at our associations quite often don't want to be necessarily broadcast to with a one-size-fits-all message, but rather they're likely looking for more of a personalized message that's in context with their own journey and interest. So there's really three sort of members or personas that we typically like to start thinking about or considering as we start to wrap our minds around how we might put a personalization strategy into place. Here, this sort of roadmap, if you will, seems pretty logical, right? We've got anonymous users or visitors. We've got known members or visitors, and then the understood, people that we certainly know some things about, but maybe not necessarily how to connect with them. By ideally moving those users or visitors that are in that anonymous category to known or even understood, you begin to better understand your membership base and then begin to target them with the best message. Acquia, for example, and there are some other tools out there as well, can help make this process a lot more efficient and certainly possible. So when we start to look at the customer journey next, that can include many different touch points. And Chris, you can go ahead and move on to the next slide here as an example. So each of these touch points is an opportunity, right? They may include digital, they may include non-digital, working together to create ideally a connected experience or a journey across this life cycle, if you will. So while we all know that it's critical to engage with members or non-members across these touch points, I think many of us probably recognize that this is very challenging because oftentimes systems are disconnected. We don't have a good visibility into data that connects all these. So again, ideally, you're looking for a tool or technology that can help you connect all these different technologies and ideally unify a profile of these users in terms of data to help deliver a connected end-to-end customer experience. So you can go ahead and move on again, Chris. So one of the things that we like to highlight or talk about are some of the challenges that we see. So it's clear that as we begin to unfold this picture, as we click through here, that marketers have a clear data problem. And I think this is, I'll let you read some of these statistics across the screen. I think Chris did a nice job, like I said, of distilling some interesting figures and numbers down for us earlier. But what I want to use really this point in the presentation to talk about is to highlight likely the most important aspect of personalization as we see it, and that's data. So at its core, everything that you do and every personalization really flows through data. It's the first step to any effective personalization strategy, and having good data is, I think, would be obvious as a requirement to doing personalization well. You certainly cannot do personalization without good data. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we see when we talk with organizations and what the impact likely could, unfortunately or potentially be on the organizations that we oftentimes partner with. So Chris, you can go ahead and move on again. The frequent challenges that we often hear is with the inability to discover and use the great content and assets that we likely already have within our organizations from across different silos. It leaves us challenged and oftentimes have to manually update content and duplicate efforts. Oftentimes this results in inconsistent content and a worst case scenario, a fragmented experience for our members and non-members alike. And it's not just siloed content that's the problem, but data, again, you'll likely hear me harp on this a few times, is really living across disparate technologies. It's in other systems. This prevents us as well from getting this holistic view of our users and our members. That really makes it almost impossible to understand our audiences, and then in turn, the type of experience that they're looking for. So again, if we're not providing personalized experiences to our members so they can appreciate the value of their membership, or even helping non-members understand the value of our membership, oftentimes visitors who come to our sites are left frustrated and unwilling to continue down the path of conversion, whatever that call to action may be. So, although it's great that we're all embracing and getting excited about personalization, I'm actually here to tell you it's not all sunshine and rainbows, unfortunately. And in fact, personalization, quite honestly, isn't easy. So, Chris, if you want to go ahead and move ahead to the next slide here, what I'd like to start talking about is really the ideal. So, oftentimes there's a lot of when I have conversations with my clients, there's a lot of technology that's out there, and there's a lot of sort of noise and a lot of buzz around personalization. But I think a lot of the technology has sort of left people wanting more. And so I think we can probably all agree it would be amazing if there was an automatic, turnkey, personalized with a flip of the switch solution out there. But I'm here to tell you that's not the case. Doing personalization the right way is an investment in time, it's an investment in resources, it's an investment in content, and it's also an investment in technology. Doing it the right way to deliver results that can really drive the experience for your members and your users, ideally would require a personalization tool that's going to do these sorts of things. It's going to eliminate that wasted time that's duplicating effort to keep your content synchronized. Many, if not all, of the organizations and associations that I work with have fantastic content, but it's about breaking down those silos and making that content available for any delivery channel to the right person at the right time and the right place. Ideally as well, any personalization strategy should help and integrate with any of the existing technology or legacy systems that you're already using. By no means, and in terms of being at Acquia, do we ever want to have you rip and replace something that's working well, and most importantly, that you've likely already made a significant investment in time and resources into. Those are a few things that we like to think about. In terms of the data challenge, right? So I talked about the need for good data to really be effective in implementing any personalization strategy. In order to do that, you really need a single customer or member or non-member view across all devices and channels. Ideally, again, you'd want some way to create a dynamic segmentation, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, talk about next actually, with real-time contextualized data or content. This all would help gain insight into what your members and non-members are doing, and this is really the initial step in personalization. When you start to think about then the absolute ideal, right? You're going to be looking for a solution or a platform that delivers content and context across that entire journey from one single platform. Normally, this would require many separate tools for content and for data. But what you're looking for, again, ideally, is a seamless way to leverage that customer data, that user data, to create a personalized experience from a single tool. It should also be something that's very easy to use, not just for marketers, but really anyone within the organization. The other concept that we oftentimes run into is this matters a great deal to your IT staff, because they would be looking for a tool that's very easy to integrate and be able to build out on. And then finally, I'd be remiss if I wasn't a bit biased. Right, we were at Acquia, are certainly a Drupal associated company based on our heritage. Our tool would be optimized for a open source content management system like Drupal. However, these tools certainly do work across any other enterprise CMS platforms. So I mentioned, being at Acquia, these are the types of platforms that we deliver. Certainly at the end of our presentation, we'll offer some ways that you can connect with us if you're interested in learning more. But that's really a brief overview of the technology. I told you I wanted to leave you with some ideas conceptually about personalization in more practical terms, and give you some real ideas of where to begin. So let's move ahead here, Chris. So from a segmentation perspective, when you begin to even think about personalization, you're likely going to be looking for ways to really organize your strategy. And segmentation and personas are kind of the guiding principles by which you'll begin. And let's move forward, because I'm going to dig into these a little bit more here, Chris. So we talked a lot about data. and if we go ahead and move to the next slide here, what I want to be, again, very mindful of is, we think the secret sauce to really help turning personalization from theory into reality is a 3-step methodology. And we've taken to calling this the crawl, walk, run approach. So I want to give you some ideas around sort of generalized use cases and what personalization could look like in reality for your organization. So when we start to think about crawl personalizations, these are the ones that you can start with immediately from a content and data standpoint. They're generally low effort, meaning it's easy to collect that data. Those personalizations can be ongoing. They've got varying impact, but they have fast results. Some examples of some crawl personalizations would be things like geolocation. So people who are visiting our site from a specific city, you personalize a section of your homepage with information or registration for a local event that you might be sponsoring in that particular city or area. You can use things like marketing campaigns. So for those who received an email with a specific UTM code, if they click on that link to the email, you can create a consistent experience across channels by personalizing the homepage to match the content in that email that your visitor is coming from. One of the very most simple ways is by visit frequency. So first-time visitors will see the About Us image and a link maybe predominantly displayed above the fold, while visitors or even members who have been to the site many times before don't see any of the About Us information above the fold. And maybe people who have returned to the site multiple times in a short window, you can offer an opportunity to sign up for a newsletter or even receive a piece of very popular content. One of the other simple ways is just by device type. So for mobile users, you can evaluate your analytics, see which content is most popular with mobile users, and then provide them with that content on the homepage based on the device that they're visiting from. Those are some very simple, basic crawl ideas for getting started with personalization. Now, as you start to mature and you start to weave in more of your content and even more data, you move into the walk phase, if you will. So these personalizations usually require additional content. They certainly require a bit more data collection for further defined segments. And these are medium to high effort data that might require multiple visits, additional content creation, but they also have medium to high impact. Some of the examples of walk personalization are things like browsing behavior. So you can tag content for certain sections of the site, like a blog, videos, or other pages that might align to a specific segment that you want to track. Then when visitors interact with that content more than others, you can deliver that same relevant content to them on sections of the homepage and the interior pages, no matter where they browse. Pages viewed is another simple one here. So you can contextualize the site based on multiple views. If a visitor has looked at awareness type content multiple times in a, say, 30-day period, you could serve them conversion content on their next visit. Or if someone visits a page about a specific topic several times, you could serve them new content that's been created on that topic the next time they visit the page. Another idea here is completed events. So visitors who have taken action, maybe they're signing up for a webinar, maybe they attended an event, or even joining a newsletter. You can serve them reminders about the event. You can serve them content or even information about a similar related event and show them an action or an ask related to that next stage of your funnel. Those are some ideas around walking. Right? We certainly recommend that you start with the crawl approach, begin to move into walk, and when you're ready to run, these personalizations are going to require certainly additional content. They're going to require more personalization events, and they're going to require even more data, again, for further defined segments. These are a little bit more high in effort, which is why we list them under the run methodology. They do require data collection and integration, potentially from other systems. They do require moderate to even extensive content creation, and more research and manpower oftentimes is required to build and execute out these rules. That's the bad side of that. The good side is they have a very relatively high impact during an extended period of time. So some of the examples of what I'm talking about are things like integrating with your CRM system or your AMS system. So leveraging data from tools like this, or even marketing automation tools like Marketo or Acquia or HubSpot, and personalize content on those sites or even mobile applications based on segment IDs or other identifiers that we've pulled from those types of systems. You can also start thinking about doing more cross-channel personalization. So fulfilling an order, some sort of call to action on a mobile site, and then receiving an incentive or some call to action that prompts you to visit or view via email the next time you log in from your mobile device or from your browser. And finally, just sort of a combination of all these multiple crawl personalizations. So regional content to visitors from that region who assign from a site by clicking on an online ad based on some information we were able to pull out of our association management system, allows us then to serve a very contextualized, very targeted one-to-one message to some of our members and non-members. So hopefully those ideas start to really jog your minds and give you some ideas to take back and begin thinking about in terms of how you might begin to put a personalization strategy into play. The last thing I really wanted to leave you with are, again, a little bit more granular ideas around how personalization can impact your association. So, again, these are just some takeaways to be mindful of. The idea around speaking to these small but very direct audiences, right? The idea is around tailoring your content and message for both members and non-members alike, right? Very different personas, of course. Ideally, you want to be driving cross-selling, upselling, and helping to retain members by offering the best content to that right audience to promote membership value, events, publications, whatever your call to action might be. You want to help guide those visitors through your conversion funnel. So leading your visitors to the right call to action to help you gain insight and helping increase conversion, whatever that might be. All of this, again, is data, 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 right? So enhancing that data-driven decision marketing, it tells a very powerful story that it will help you better serve your members, hopefully entice non-members, and then continue to help inform your content decisions as you find ways to better serve your constituencies. So I hope that some of those ideas were valuable. I think at this point, I'm going to turn things back over to Chris, and I believe we're going to open it up for some Q&A. Chris?
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, so we've purposely kind of paced this to give plenty of time for Q&A because we thought with this topic that would probably be maybe the bulk of, we'd like to give people an opportunity to really ask individualized questions. So we are opening it up for Q&A. We have a few already submitted. If you could submit your question through GoToWebinar, you'll just type that in here and that'll come over to us. So our first question, Jason, comes from Steve, and he says, for a mid to large size association, what do you think the best place to get started is with personalization?
Sure, that's a great question. It's one I'm obviously very oftentimes asked. So I think you've likely heard me, and I even just wrapped up with that same sentiment. I mean, really, data collection is everything when it comes to personalization, right? We can't put any sort of strategy into play unless we understand the market that we're serving. Again, many of the associations I work with have a good sense for the types of information that their members are most interested in. It's non-members that oftentimes are somewhat of a challenge, and then matching up that right content to the right audience. Those are the things that when you get started, I think are somewhat of the challenge. So, my direct answer is the more that you can do around data collection is really everything. And so, tying this back to some technology, the way that our approach works is, using our platform, we oftentimes recommend that our customers start over the first course of at least 3, 6, sometimes even 9 months, just collecting data before they even start to think about putting personalization strategies into play.
Yeah, Jason, and just on our side at Unleash Technologies, I think, what we would answer to that question would be to start small, and you echoed this earlier, but really, understand that that personalization is not going to be a box that's just checked once, right? This is going to be a sustained effort, regardless of what tool, if you're using Acquia Lift, any other tool, who's going to be responsible for what parts of that, and, how can you keep that going in your organization, looking past 6 months to a year to the following year, and and just have that plan in place before you even really get started on some of that legwork. Is who's responsible for what, and how do you guys move forward from there?
Yeah, great point.
So our next question, and this is a kind of a multi-part one, comes from Ruth, and she asks, so Jason, I think this one's kind of geared towards you and the content you were discussing earlier. What's the time frame you typically see between, for a nonprofit or an association, going from the crawl to the walk stage and then the walk to the run? Is there any, kind of consistency there? Or?
Yeah, that's too funny. It's another question I get very often. I'm not sure if the impetus behind this question is, can I skip right ahead and go and begin running right away, or start walking before I crawl? So, I'd love to say there is a one-size-fits-all approach, but there really isn't. I think each organization that we work with, although they face sometimes similar challenges or using similar technologies, it does vary, from based on where you're at from a digital maturity perspective, where you're at from a technology perspective, where you are, again, I hate to sound like a broken record, where you are from a data collection perspective. But, to answer your question, Ruth, I think, looking at this, practically, I mentioned oftentimes with our customers that we engage with, we found from a best practice standpoint, about a 6-month time frame for at least that crawl approach is we find very valuable. That gives you a nice foundation in terms of collecting data, in terms of understanding how your segments and personas are really fitting to your audience. And then, what flows through from there is what content is really resonating here. And now, if we know that this particular piece of content is really seeming to move the needle of, again, whether it's your non-members that you're converting to members, or even having members more engaged, then let's double down on that content. And so there are some also tools that are built into our technology, again, not to be too Acquia focused here, but there are some A/B testing tools based in our technology that help you start to inform those content decisions. And then moving on to the walk and the run approach begin to be easier, I guess, is the best way of framing that. So again, long-winded answer to your short question, Ruth. I'd say begin with the idea that the first phase should be at least 6 months. And then based on how you do from there, I think is probably a bit of a subjective answer to the second and third and really fourth phases of ongoing personalization. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Jason. So our next question comes from Jane, and it's, so what's an example of an association doing personalization really well in terms of email marketing? And Jason, I'll take this one. So I would say one I've noticed is New Jersey Society of CPAs. They deliver email newsletters that vary in content based on like the recipient's interest, their particular chapter affiliation, their geographic location, member type. So all of those factors are getting considered. And then rather than building multiple separate newsletters for each of those segments, what New Jersey Society of CPAs does is they build one newsletter with variable content. So it only appears for recipients matching the corresponding criteria. So two members who receive that same newsletter from NJCPA on that same day might see widely different content. And so that's one example of email personalization that I think I've seen on the association side that's been doing really, really well. Jason, so next question comes from Andrew, who says, what are some of the downsides or lessons learned that you've seen in your experience from early adopters of a personalization on the association or nonprofit front?
Sure. Okay. I think to kind of harken back to that best practice approach, the crawl, walk, run. I think what initially, when we released our technology around personalization called Lift, I think one of the things that we oftentimes saw were our clients be a little bit overly ambitious. And, again, I know I do sound like a broken record at this point, but, really, again, starting small into bite-sized pieces and finding an approach or a strategy that gives you some quick wins is always the ideal versus trying to necessarily boil the ocean all at once. So, I would say that, we love having these conversations. We love that our customers and our clients are excited about the possibilities of personalization. I would say, my best advice in this regard is to start slow, get some quick victories, get some quick wins under your belt, and then build out from there. And likely that's the same approach that we'd recommend across any type of new technology. Is to start small, manageable size pieces. Again, in particular, working with nonprofit organizations and associations, which are sometimes stretched for resources. I think that becomes even more critical, that we're able to show our stakeholders, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's the results that we've seen so far. What can we do to help your, part of the organization or serve your interest in terms of reaching out to members, non-members, and the like.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I would say, one thing that I think a lot of early adopters of personalization, especially on the association front, probably were not banking on was GDPR, which goes into effect tomorrow. And so, with those regulations in place, it's kind of thrown a curveball. I mean, not anything that can't be overcome, but certainly I think everyone is figuring out, what does GDPR mean for their association or nonprofit? And, how does that impact the work they've already done in personalization? And I think that remains to be seen from that standpoint. And I think the other thing, and this was particularly evident, I think, in the community branch digital survey, was we all want personalized content, but then we get to points where it's just too personal. And it almost kind of makes us take a step back and has the opposite effect. And so I think that's probably for anybody going down this path, it's figuring out where those points are, where those pain points are, and where people start to push it back a little bit too much and say, okay, I was not expecting you to serve me that content, and I'm not sure how that makes me feel. So, and that's just a learning curve, I think, for every different association and nonprofit. It's not a one size fits all, but it is something that the data supports, is that people want personalized content, but there's also limits to that. So we got another question that just came in from Mark, and his question, it looks like it's mostly around, he asks, is Lift only usable with Drupal, or is it open to other content management systems?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a product specific question. Lift is it's designed and optimized for Drupal. However, it can be used with any of the market leading CMS platforms that are out there. So we are agnostic, although it is tuned specifically to work best with Drupal.
Excellent. Another question here. Looks like to start, it's coming in still here. It's from Frank. Frank asks, okay, so he says, Lift sounds interesting. What is the long-term plan for Acquia Lift and the product? And, where do you guys see the growth coming from, specifically in the association market, it looks like, in the next, say, 2 years?
Well, I can talk a little bit about I suppose the technology itself, and then take the second part of that question as well. Thanks, Frank. So from a bit of a roadmap perspective, I guess, one of the things that we see more and more of is artificial intelligence and machine learning being built into these tools. And so today, again, I don't want to be too focused on our product specifically. I want to make sure that we get value to everyone in terms of personalization. But our technology in particular does have some element of machine learning tied into it. I think what you'll begin to see, at least from tools like Acquia Lift, is that we're starting to develop more of that machine learning, so sort of doubling down on the machine learning side of things, and even starting to build in some AI, some artificial intelligence that will take the segments that today we're using data to create ourselves, and then assign the right content to serve to those segments. A lot of that being much more automated, and in some cases, if you choose it to be this way, to really sort of kind of set it and forget it almost. I hate to steal that term, but so hopefully that gives you some sense, Frank, of what we're thinking about and talking about. It's really making segmentation and serving content more automated than it is today with our platform. In terms of the association space itself, where I see the growth, I think that's maybe a little bit trickier for me to respond to. But I would say based on the conversations that I have with with folks that are working at these types of organizations, just things that they're oftentimes thinking about. I don't know if this would resonate with people on this call. Is most importantly, how do I demonstrate to my existing members that we understand them and that we are serving them with information, content, learning opportunities that are valuable to them, and that in turn should help really, start to craft what the value of membership for our association means and what it's worth. And from there, I think it's an easy transition to begin using that same sort of framework, if you will, to find and reach out to non-members and help them understand that value. So, where I see this playing a role in that approach is, again, is serving those different types of audiences. I think those are the most basic that we can all relate to, is non-members and members, is serving them with the right content. Of course, if you begin to distill that down, it's likely many of the organizations or many of the associations that are with us today then also have different types of membership, and therefore then also have different types of non-members. So if you think of it as sort of like a decision tree, it begins to build out on itself. What's really very interesting to me is the content side of this as well. I kept harping on data, but again, I probably said this during my presentation. Most, if not all, organizations I talk with have plenty of content. That's rarely the problem. The challenge becomes, I've got all this great content. How do I get it organized in a way that's easy for all of us from a staff perspective to use and get value out of? And then again, tying this back to data, personalization, and our audiences, how do we then make sure that content finds its way to the right people who are looking for it? So, hopefully, Frank, that gives you, I'm not sure exactly what you were looking for on the trending association side, but again, that just thought I'd share some experience of what I heard. Hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Jason. We have one more question, and actually this is a perfect one to wrap up on. It comes from Megan, and she asked, personalization looks like it involves marketing team, membership team, and technology teams. What would be the one takeaway you would want me to bring back to my association and those three teams from today's time?
Great question. Well, Megan, thank you. So I think the way that I would respond to that was if I was wearing my my Acquia evangelist hat, I'd say reach out to Chris and the team, or reach out to us here at Acquia, and we'll help Megan help you understand how it's relatively easy to do, bringing those three people to the table. That's probably a cheap and easy way out of answering that question. But candidly, the one takeaway, I think, and this would tie back to something that you heard me say repeatedly, is if you can find a way to bring together likely yourself and those two other constituencies within your organization, it's find the systems internally where you are collecting good data about your members and non-members or site visitors. It's likely those three different groups within your organization might be using different technology. So what I would say is do your best to find a way to find a common area or common way to share that data as a beginning stage or a beginning point for how you're going to even begin to think about personalization. Again, it all ties back to data. So if there's a way that you can find a communication point to get on the same page in terms of data sharing or collecting, that's a great place to start. And then from there, you start to look outward to some technology that maybe you already have in-house that you can begin to adopt and maybe just sort of put your toe in the water to start testing out some of these ideas.
Thanks, Jason. Megan, what I would say, and this goes back to the Community Brands digital member survey that they did, was if we look back on that, we in terms of personalized content, everyone, it was 50% or up, but then for millennials specifically, it was off the charts. And so what I would say is obviously, millennial engagement is probably going to differ for every association and nonprofit, but at some point, that's going to be your audience. It might not be tomorrow, it might not be next year, or even a few years, but at some point, that focus is coming in. And so I would just say, have that plan or start thinking in that capacity where, what are we doing to attract millennials to our association, and how do we personalize the experiences for them?
Yeah, good stuff.
So at this point, guys, that is all of our questions for today. I did want to leave you with a way to reach out to us. So if you do have any further questions, you want to speak offline, just feel free to reach out to our team by emailing us at start@unleashed-technologies.com, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, or if interface with Jason as well in terms of the Acquia side of the equation here. We will be emailing out a link to the recording of today's webinar in case you want to share it with anyone or just go back and revisit some of the content. And we really appreciate you taking about an hour of your day here before the holiday weekend to spend with us. So on that note, we'll see you next month for our next webinar, and thank you all for attending.
Thanks, everyone.